Wind rushed through Kari's hair as she clung to Dragonite's neck, her stomach fluttering in exhilaration as they descended towards the plateau. This was it, the site of the Indigo League. After a long, arduous journey of narrow victories, shameful losses, and eventually earning all 8 Johto gym badges through blood, sweat and tears, she was finally here. And, with Dragonite by her side, nothing could stop her from being crowned champion this year. "You tired?" she called to her partner. The Pokemon grinned and took a playful dive by way of an answer, and she chuckled as even her stomach took a lurch at the unexpected movement. "Thought not. I was thinking we should find a trainer for a practice match, just to see where we stand compared to the other people here. What do you say?" "I'm in," replied the dragon, and took another swoop downwards, energized at the thought of a battle. Kari smiled to herself. She'd always figured that even if she hadn't been interested, he would have dragged her out to be a trainer anyway. He could never stand being a pet. Dragonite skillfully pulled into a low, lazy hover over the general area, and Kari peered down at the trainers, trying to pick out a suitable opponent. She ignored those that were just squabbling with one another. If they came all the way here only to spend their time talking instead of training, they were probably just casual trainers, and in the weaker half. Some were battling against each other, but if she landed next to a battle and watched over until it was over, it would look like she was sneakily trying to gauge their battle styles and strategies for the tournament. But others were discussing strategies with their Pokemon or practicing moves alone, and it was to them that she looked now. "That guy," she said at last. "Blonde, 10 o'clock with the scissor. Let's see if he's any good." Her Pokemon nodded and approached the trainer she indicated, landing a safe distance away. It tended to startle people when they landed too close. The boy's Scizor was expertly smashing a rock into pieces with its metallic claws, paying them no notice as its trainer gave some inaudible directions. Kari slid off Dragonite's back. The trainer turned to her as the two of them walked towards him. "Hey," she called, raising a hand in greeting. "I just got here and want an idea of how I stand. Quick one-on-one? Your strongest against my strongest?" She pointed a thumb over her shoulder to indicate her Pokemon, while she quickly sized up her opponent. He was on the short side, skinny and pale and sickly looking, but his light blue eyes sparkled with the same confidence she'd seen in his posture that had made her decide to challenge him. His Scizor looked disinterestedly up at her as the boy cocked his head slightly. "A Dragonite?" he asked. "Impressive. Where'd you get it?" Kari grinned. "My grandpa's one of the elders of the Dragon's Den in Blackthorn City. Gave him to me as a Dratini when I was a kid. So, what have you got to match him? Scizor?" The boy fingered one of the Pokeballs at his belt slowly, as he glanced at the bug Pokemon. "Oh no," he replied. "Scizor's not my strongest. That's why I needed the training." He turned his gaze back towards her and smiled. "Okay, you're on. One-on-one." Dragonite stepped in front of Kari, giving her a quick nod and a grin before he turned to face his opponent. The other trainer detached the Pokeball he'd been fiddling from his belt, turned it over in his palms a few times, and then called, "Snorlax, go!" Kari raised her eyebrows as the Pokeball he threw released a huge blob of white light. She'd assumed the kid was pretty good, sure, but not a lot of people had a Snorlax. Plus, that it just didn't seem to fit such a small, skinny trainer. But, unexpected as it was, it didn't pose a problem for Dragonite. He stood tall and unwavering as the light took the shape of Snorlax's enormous round belly and 2 stubby feet, and Kari didn't doubt that he could win. "Okay, Dragonite, let's start this battle off with a safeguard," she said, studying the other trainer's face as she gave the order. He still seemed calm, confident, self-assured. She wondered idly how long that would last. "Snorlax, curse!" Dragonite took off from the ground and formed a translucent white protective sphere around himself as he watched the other Pokemon closely. Kari couldn't see the Snorlax's head, but she could hear its heavy, deep voice mumbling as if it was in its sleep. Curse. Wasn't that the move that Morty's ghost Pokemon had used? She cringed at the memory. Dratini had been brought down in both of her challenges by the terrifying invisible spectres the ghosts had produced by sacrificing their own strength. She could see in his eyes that he was anticipating the same, but he wasn't shuddering and shivering like he had then. In fact, a quick glance and nod confirmed that he didn't feel any adverse effects at all. Most likely the safeguard had blocked it then. "Dragonite, outrage," she said warily, watching the boy. He didn't look like someone whose move had just failed. Poker face? Or was she just missing something? Curse again, the trainer ordered, and Kari looked sharply up at Dragonite in alarm as his body began to flare with blue flames. She was definitely missing something. This guy wasn't stupid enough just to retry a move that didn't work. "Wait, Dragonite," she began, even though she knew at this point he couldn't hear or understand her. His face contorted with fabricated rage, and then he took a sweeping dive towards the Snorlax and smashed his body into its gigantic belly. It gave way like a trampoline and sent him bouncing back up. The Snorlax continued to mumble as if it hadn't noticed the attack at all. Dragonite was still showing no signs of being harmed by the curse attack. However, and as soon as he regained control of his flight, he swooped down again in a more precisely aimed attack at the Snorlax's head. This time, there was a reaction. An irritated grunt just as the dragon struck, but no more. And as Dragonite pulled back up, the trainer gave yet another order. One more curse. It still wasn't affecting Dragonite at all from the looks of it. So, it had to be affecting Snorlax itself, one way or another since the boy kept using it. And when it was shrugging off powerful attacks so easily, it seemed plain that it was boosting its defensive abilities. She was lost as to how the same move could be doing this now, and something completely different when Morty used it. But there was only one conclusion she could draw from this, which meant that the best that they could do was try to use moves that bypassed it. "Dragonite," she called, as her Pokemon smashed himself in Snorlax for the last time and the dragon flames faded from his body. "Use a Dragon Rage!" It took him a moment to reorient himself after the outrage, but the safeguard successfully warded off the worst of it. As Snorlax began to mumble for the third time, Dragonite took a deep breath and expelled it in a blast of blue-green fire that enveloped the normal type's body for a few tense seconds. Kari heard the Snorlax groan in pain and grinned triumphantly as she looked back at the other boy, daring him to come up with some counter-strategy. "Snorlax, Body Slam!" Nothing at all happened for a few seconds. Kari seized the opportunity to shout another Dragon Rage. As Dragonite prepared to repeat its previous attack, Snorlax's arms reached slowly forward on either side of its body, and miraculously, it managed to prop itself into a sitting position, allowing Kari to finally see its expressionless face, just before it was hit with a second round of Dragon Fire. It grunted again, but in an aloof kind of way, as if it was only barely aware of the pain. Then, it leant forward, somehow got its legs under itself and stood up, wobbling unsteadily. An idea popped into her head, and she couldn't possibly resist the opportunity to try. "Dragonite, knock it down with extreme speed," she called quickly, and her Pokemon became a tan-coloured blur as he zoomed straight into Snorlax's body. He let out a surprised whine of pain as he crashed against its no longer soft belly, while it failed to budge at all, and then the Snorlax let itself fall forward, crushing Dragonite under its weight. The only sound he could make was a quiet squeak before he went limp. Kari stared at it in horror, so flabbergasted that it took her a second to take out the Pokeball and recall him from underneath Snorlax's massive body. That thing couldn't have just taken out Dragonite in one measly blow. She looked up limply at the other trainer, who was smirking as he recalled his own Pokemon. "Good battle," he said, and she couldn't shake the thought that he was subtly mocking her. That move. Curse. Kari looked away, blinking rapidly to preempt the tears that were dangerously close to forming in her eyes. How does it work? "It sacrifices speed to improve both attack and defense," the boy answered. "It's pretty cool. I've got a spare TM if you'd like." Kari looked back at him. He was smiling, and though her sore loser instinct still wanted to think he was a cheap idiot, he seemed to really genuinely want to help. "I think your Dragonite could use it well," he went on. "It knows extreme speed, correct? So, if it needs to strike quickly, it still can. And Dragonite are good with physical attacks." Kari nodded slowly. Though she liked fast Pokemon and would normally not be keen on sacrificing speed, he was right. Dragonite could still strike first using the unique move the elders had taught him. Best of all, nobody would expect it since normal Dragonite didn't know extreme speed. It would be just the thing to bring her team up to par, really. Especially after the immediate shock of discovering that the trainers here were stronger than she thought. "Well, I wouldn't want to take the last one from you," she said, not wanting to seem desperate or greedy. "No, really, you can have it," the boy said and walked over quickly to a green backpack that laid propped against a nearby rock. He rummaged through it for a few seconds before drawing out a CD case and hurrying over to her with it to present it to her with a smile. She took it, Both the case and CD were blank, which was odd for a TM, but then she had never heard of this TM before, so perhaps it was some sort of beta thing. "Thanks," she said. "Thanks a lot." "Glad to help," replied the boy, before turning around to walk back to his Scizor, which was still waiting by the rocks. "Hey, wait," Kari called, and he stopped, turning back around. She had meant to ask where he got the TM, but she changed her mind before the words reached her mouth. "I remember Morty used that move, but then it worked completely differently. What's up with that?" "Oh, it's different for ghost types," the boy said. Kari looked at him blankly. "Why?" The trainer shrugged as he turned back to his bug Pokemon. "Dunno." Kari turned over and her Pokemon sent at bed for the umpteenth time. The memories of Morty's frighteningly powerful ghost Pokemon and their creepy moves from today's catastrophic failure of battle flitted around in her mind, keeping her awake. "I wonder if ghost Pokemon are the only ones that can use Curse," she mused aloud after a long while. "Probably," muttered Dratini, who was curled up on the floor with his eyes closed. "Laying curses on the opponent is a very ghost thing to do. I don't know of any other Pokemon that do anything quite like that." "I guess," Kari paused. "What about sacrificing health for power bit? Morty worded it like it was just to get the power to do it. Couldn't you use the power for something other than cursing the opponent then?" "Go to sleep," Dratini said groggily. "Will you ever stop thinking about that move? You're just overanalyzing it because we lost the battle. And it's not the end of the world." Kari sighed. "I guess not. I'm sorry. Good night, Dratini." "Night, Kari." "I'm so sorry," Kari said, stroking Dragonite's muzzle as the nurse left them alone in the room. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," he replied heavily after a second's pause. "Just tired and dizzy. Some rest and I'll be fine." "It's that move Curse, I know it," she said. "It always leaves you a bit numb and tired. I should have known it wouldn't be wise to use it too often in one battle. I'm sorry." "It's not your fault." "No, really. I should never have had you use it. You said you didn't like it after we first tried it. I should have listened to you then. It's bad for you, even if it powers you up. From now on, we're not using Curse ever again, okay?" Dragonite smiled, and she could tell that he was relieved. "Thanks," he muttered. "I'm sorry, Dragonite. I really am. You don't need some creepy power-up move to be strong. We're gonna train and we'll win this thing without it. And I'll find that kid who gave me the TM and tell him to stop using it too." She took a deep breath. "I love you, Dragonite," she said quietly. "I wouldn't want to win with a move that makes you sick." The Pokemon nuzzled at her, closing his eyes. "I know," he whispered. "It's no one's fault. We just didn't know how bad it could get. That's all." Kari paced around their room, still agitated after the loss earlier. "So, the ghosts are sacrificing their own health to use that curse thing, and then it put a curse on you that has invisible spectres assaulting you?" Dratini nodded tiredly, probably a little annoyed at being interrogated the moment he was out of the Pokemon Center. "How does that work? Morty's little speech implied that they're just hurting themselves to gather the power they need, but how do they gain power by hurting themselves? I've never heard of Pokemon doing that before." "Beats me," Dratini replied. "But it's just a move. We can work around it. Stop worrying and let's figure it out." "Fine." Kari took a deep breath. "Okay, you're right. It doesn't matter how it works. We'll just find our way past Morty, and then we'll hopefully never have to worry about that stupid move again." Kari never did find that boy who'd given her the TM. She hadn't seen him around since that day, and nobody she asked knew his name or where he'd gone. She figured, or hoped, that he'd realised the unsettling after effects of the move and left to care for his Snorlax. Meanwhile, Dragonite got better. It took several days before he felt motivated again, but it happened eventually, and within a week, he was back to his old cheerful, energetic self. "What was up with that move anyway?" said Kari during one training session. "I mean, what is it you're muttering when you use it? Pokemon swear words?" "I don't really know," Dragonite replied, musing. "It's just part of the move. I'm not very consciously aware of exactly what it entails. It's like when I'm flying. It's not like I'm thinking about just what muscles I'm pulling. Huh. Are all TMs like that? More or less. Dragonite took a deep breath and hit a nearby rock with a fire blast. I guess I could use it and try to pay attention to the words this time. No way. We're never using that move again, remember? Dragonite tilted his head in thought as he drew his paw back and smashed the scorched rock to pieces with a well-aimed punch. Well, in emergency? What are you talking about? Emergency or not, I won't make you use a move that hurts you in the long term. If that means we drop out of the tournament, so be it. You're forgetting one thing, Dragonite said, looking into her eyes. I want to win too. It's not that bad. I'd gladly lie in the Pokemon Center staring into space for twice that long if it meant we'd be champions. Of course, I'd rather not do it if we could do without it. But when it would save us, don't hesitate to order it. I'll do it. I guess, Kari said, not sure she was entirely convinced. She straightened herself and took in a deep breath. It probably won't come to that. We've been doing great so far. I think the Snorlax kid must have just been head and shoulders above everyone else here. I doubt we'll need it. Dragonite shrugged and the conversation moved on to Kari's preliminary battles and just how stupid that one kid had to be to send out his Venusaur against Magmar. Good match, said Morty as he recalled his Gengar, his cackling laugh echoing eerily throughout the room for a second after it disappeared. Kari nodded numbly, speechless, still clutching Magmar's Pokeball in her hand. Ghost Pokemon have many ways of cursing opponents in one way or another to cripple or damage them in battle, Morty said. The move we call Curse is a particularly useful and versatile one of those ways. Even though gathering the energy to use it comes at a price, you're not the first trainer to fail to anticipate it. The only word of this speech that really stuck for Kari at the moment was fail. She has never lost to a gym leader before. They were predictable type specialists, all glaring common weaknesses that were easily exploited, with some high-level Pokemon, but not high-leveled enough to make up for it, right? Wasn't that what she'd always say? And now, she just lost to one somehow. She looked away and gave Morty some half-hearted goodbye and I'll be back, and sped out towards the Pokemon Center, her face flushed. Next time, she would win. And this was it. Finally, she was here in the main stadium, in front of thousands of spectators, staring her opponents down across the battlefield as the status screens crossed out Alakazam. Dragonite stood his ground on Kari's end, battered after that Psychic had thrown him through the wall. But satisfied and alert, ready to take on the last obstacle standing in the way between them and the championship. That obstacle was a Tyranitar. Kari knew one misstep would crush them now. Tyranitar had the type advantage, and Dragonite was hurt to boot. But she knew she could trust him to do his very best no matter what happened. They could win this together, just like all the previous battles. Just like the semi-final match when Dragonite had even taken out a Piloswine on his own. Tyranitar! Rock Slide! Dynamic Punch, Dragonite! The Tyranitar let out a deep, rumbling roar as Dragonite took flight and zoomed towards it. Huge chunks of rocks rose from the ground around Tyranitar while the dragon approached, paw clenched, and then, as Dragonite's fist swung, the dinosaur jerked its head to the right, and the punch missed. Kari knew Dynamic Punch was easy to dodge, but as the boulders crashed into Dragonite's body and buried him under, she bit her lip with a twinge of guilt. Taking this risk probably hadn't been worth it. It had been a stupid move on her part. A stupid move could cost them the championship they both desired. She couldn't screw up like that again. Dragonite, Outrage! Tyranitar, Screech! Screech. That would cripple his defensive abilities. She couldn't let that happen while he was out of control. Wait, Kari shouted, before Dragonite had the chance to prepare his attack. He looked quickly around as Tyranitar opened his mouth and let out a horrifying high-pitched sound. Kari saw Dragonite flinch as he heard it. Use Curse, she said after a moment's hesitation. Dragonite closed his eyes and began to mutter inaudibly, and Kari could see pent-up tension in his body relaxing. Was it just an effect of the move, or was he actually relieved she'd ordered it? Rock Slide, shouted the other trainer, and Tyranitar roared, sending a barrage of rocks in Dragonite's way. Again, Kari said, and then cringed as Dragonite was crushed under the boulders. But then he rose up again, slowly, but without difficulty, and continued to mumble. There was a pause, and it hit Kari with a jolt that the other trainer probably felt the same about Curse as she had when she battled the Snorlax kid. He was probably confused, not sure what it did, and that meant they could use his confusion to replicate the Snorlax kid's strategy. "Another rock slide," came the order at last, a hint of doubt in his tone. Kari's heart thumped rapidly as she saw Dragonite open his eyes again. "One more curse, give it your all!" Rocks buried the dragon underneath them yet again, but he rose from the rubble with a dazed indifference. His eyes closed again, and began his chant, a bit louder than before. And though it wouldn't make much difference to the audience and the other trainer, it allowed Kari to finally make out the words. "Dark One, set your curse upon me, drain my soul away, steal my lifeblood bit by bit, accept my final gift." At first, she just stared in incomprehension, everything jumbling up in her head. "Dragonite?" she said in a limp disbelief. "Dragonite, stop!" she called, louder as it all began to piece itself back together in her mind. But the Pokemon didn't hear her, and simply droned on in a low, raspy voice. "Give me power, give me strength, and I'll give you my soul." "Tyranitar, one more rock slide," called the other trainer. Oblivious, Kari stared wildly at him, as if expecting him to step in and stop this somehow. "Give me glory, give me fame, I will give you me." Dragonite looked up, and his opponent began to raise rocks from the ground. For a moment, Kari stared fixedly at his back, eyes wide, almost expecting him to vanish into thin air. But he did not vanish. He stood motionless, shrugging off the rock slide without so much as flinching. "Dynamic punch," she managed to say, all the while repeating to herself that he would be okay, that he would just need some rest and then he would be fine, that it was worth it this one time if they won the league, right? It took him a few seconds to react. The other trainer used the opportunity to order another rock slide. Then, slowly, Dragonite took off the ground, flew towards the Tyranitar. A few boulders smashed him in the face on the way, but he hardly seemed to notice, and smashed his fist into the dinosaur's stomach. The impact threw it backwards, sending it crashing into the wall as it roared and twisted in pain. "Extreme speed," Kari called quickly, and Dragonite tackled the Tyranitar down at a sudden blinding speed as it tried to rise. Its trainer stared open-mouthed at his Pokemon as it failed to make another attempt, and as the spectators realized the battle had reached its conclusion, the crowd erupted into explosive applause. Dragonite stood still on the arena and blinked dully at Kari. "Dratini, be ready," Kari said, with confidence as she faced the leader of Ecruteak Gym. Contrary to whatever prior ideas she had about ghost-type specialists, Morty was a handsome young man with a fair complexion and a lump of hay-blonde hair held back by a purple headband. She really couldn't help thinking he didn't seem very tough. "Ghost Pokemon are just souls that take a physical form," the gym leader began, as Dratini slithered into the arena, focused and determined as always, his tail twitching in anticipation. "They're mischievous and humorous because high spirits nourish the soul, and for them, nourishing the soul means the body as well. Our souls are fragile, and may never fully recover when damaged, but theirs can mend quickly. They have to, because otherwise they would die." He paused for a moment. "And that is why they fascinate me." "Spare us the speech," Kari replied. "We're here for a badge, not a lecture." "Very well," said Morty evenly, as he removed a Pokeball from his belt. "Ghastly, go! Use Curse!" "He's the same. Doesn't speak, doesn't react to much, eats what you put in front of him." The nurse hesitated. "What on earth happened to him?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," said Kari. "Let me see him." The nurse bowed and led the way down a long corridor into the private room Kari had paid for to have him placed in after receiving the prize money. She waved the nurse out and closed the door, leaving her alone with the great dragon that lay flat on his stomach on the soft bed in the middle of the room. "Dragonite?" she whispered. There was no response. The Pokemon's eyes stared blankly straight ahead. After a moment of silence, she pulled up a chair and sat down beside him. Her hand reached out to his neck and stroked it gently. "We did it, you know? We're champions. She paused, watching his eye carefully for a reaction. But again, there was none. Kari sighed and pulled her hand back, staring at her partner for a long while. "It's pretty fun being the champion," she said quietly. "They granted me access to Mount Silver, where only champions can go. I've met powerful trainers from other regions there, and kids recognize me in the street and ask for autographs." She paused again. "They ask how you're doing and want to see you, and I have to lie to them and tell them that you're fine and you just don't like the attention. But I know you'd love it." Kari gazed at the Pokemon for a few painful seconds, tears burning in her eyes. "Why aren't you getting better?" she asked bitterly, clenching her fist. "You always got better before. I thought you'd told me you'd get better. But now it's been 2 weeks and you're still not talking or reacting. Or..." Her voice abruptly broke into a choked burst of hysterical sobbing, and somewhere within her flashed a ridiculous hope for a fairy tale ending where seeing her cry would snap him out of it and he would rise to comfort her and everything would be back to normal. But she looked back at him, and his eyes remained dull and lifeless, devoid of the spark that had once made him who he was. "Please, look at me," she whispered pointlessly. And her heart jumped as his head moved, but sank again when his face turned towards her with that same empty stare, like a giant marionette strung up by her commands. She shivered at the unsettling void in his eyes and told him with a shaky voice to look away again. "You still respond to commands," she thought aloud, as the head turned back towards the wall. "You just don't have any will, or personality, or..." There was a long silence. Kari looked away, gripping the armrest on her chair tightly, as if she could make everything okay if she squeezed it hard enough. She knew, deep down, that Dragonite would never come back. But she couldn't go home and tell her grandfather that she had made him use a move that was chipping pieces from his soul in order to win the championship. Saying he'd told her he wanted to use it would be a hollow excuse. Saying he died would be an obvious lie when there had been no burial and no body. Besides, they would want to know why, and the thought of euthanizing him, even though she knew he wasn't really him anymore, or anyone at all, it made her nauseous. It crept upon her, slowly as she sat there, that if he still obeyed orders, he could still battle. She could probably teach him some phrases, tell her family that he no longer liked to be outside of his Pokeball, and continue journeying so that they'd never be home long enough to become suspicious. Dragonite had been strong before, and Curse had made him invincible. She could conquer the leagues of the world, and no one would ever know. Perhaps she could even consider it to be honoring the memory of the dragon who had once loved to fight and compete. Kari took a long look at Dragonite's Pokeball, and shuddered at what she was about to do before she stood up, still unable to face him. "Okay, Dragonite," she said, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "We're leaving." Thanks for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed the story. We're at the end of this one, but there are plenty more you might not have heard yet. So here are some options: my entire Pokepasta playlist, or a story that YouTube thinks you'll like from me. With all that said, I hope you leave a like, maybe a comment, and if you want to hear more, subscribe and notifications to get the latest stories as soon as they're available.